The silence in the vast crystalline chamber was broken only by the soft hum of anti-grav generators, keeping 1,200 alien representatives suspended in their observation pods. Ambassador Marcus Reed stood alone on the central platform, his black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast against the pearl-white floor that stretched out like a frozen ocean beneath him. Above, the dome of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber rose 300 meters into space, its transparent walls offering a view of the star-filled void that seemed to press down with the weight of infinite judgment. This was humanity's first appearance before the Council. After decades of careful expansion into nearby star systems, Earth had finally been noticed by the galaxy's governing body. What Marcus had expected to be a routine first contact ceremony had instead become something far more ominous. The charges against humanity were severe enough to warrant a full Council assembly, something that hadn't happened in over a century. The platform beneath Marcus began to rotate slowly, allowing each section of the amphitheater to observe the lone human representative. He caught glimpses of beings that defied imagination, crystalline entities that refracted light into rainbow patterns, gas cloud creatures contained within environmental suits, mechanical forms that might have been artificial intelligence given physical shape. Some floated in tanks of exotic liquids, others hung from the ceiling like living stalactites. The diversity was overwhelming, but the hostility radiating from the assembly was unmistakable. The species designation human will state their defense, announced a voice that seemed to come from the chamber itself. The translation matrix rendered it in perfect English, though Marcus suspected the original language was something his vocal cords could never produce. Marcus had prepared for this moment for months, studying every available record of Council proceedings. Earth's best xenopsychologists had briefed him on the social dynamics of the major species, while military strategists had gamed out every possible scenario. But standing here now, surrounded by representatives of civilizations that had mastered faster-than-light travel, while humans were still discovering agriculture, Marcus felt the full weight of humanity's inexperience. "Honored representatives," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, "humanity stands ready to answer the charges brought against us. But first, we request clarification on the nature of these accusations." A ripple of what might have been amusement or contempt passed through sections of the assembly. One of the observation pods descended from the upper tiers, revealing a being that resembled a cross between an octopus and a tree, its bark-like skin covered in pulsing bioluminescent patterns. The species exhibits rapid expansion patterns consistent with aggressive territorial acquisition, the creature said, its voice rendered as a melodious whistle by the translators. Furthermore, their military doctrine emphasizes individual initiative over collective harmony, suggesting a fundamental incompatibility with galactic civilization. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. These weren't simple territorial disputes, no. The Council was questioning humanity's right to exist as a spacefaring species. He had suspected this might be more than a diplomatic formality, but the scope of what was happening was becoming clear. This wasn't a trial about human actions. It was a judgment on human nature itself. Another pod descended, this one containing a being of pure energy contained within a geometric lattice. "The species demonstrates concerning technological advancement rates," it stated in a voice like electronic music. "Their progression from primitive combustion engines to antimatter containment occurred in less than 200 rotations. Such rapid development typically indicates either external assistance or dangerous instability." Marcus realized with growing alarm that he was witnessing something unprecedented. The Council wasn't just evaluating humanity's recent expansion. They had been monitoring Earth for centuries, possibly millennia, cataloging human development with the detached interest of scientists studying laboratory specimens. "You've been watching us," Marcus said, the words escaping before he could stop them. "All this time you've been watching our world." The chamber fell silent. Even the background hum of the life support systems seemed to pause. Marcus felt as though he had just stumbled onto something the Council preferred to keep hidden. A new voice echoed through the chamber, deeper and more resonant than the others. "The monitoring protocols are not subject to review by emerging species," it said. "The question before this assembly is whether humanity represents a viable addition to galactic civilization or a threat that must be contained." The word "contained" hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus began to understand what was really happening here. This wasn't a trial, or it was a culling. The Council had decided that humanity was developing too quickly, showing too much independence, posing too great a potential threat to the established order. They were here to determine not whether humans had committed crimes, but whether the species should be allowed to continue existing. Marcus straightened his shoulders and looked up at the assembled representatives with new resolve. If this was to be humanity's moment of judgment, then he would make sure they understood exactly what they were judging. If you've been monitoring our world for as long as your technology suggests, then you know something important about our species, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger with each word. We don't submit to arbitrary authority. We don't accept decisions made about our fate without our input, and we certainly don't disappear quietly when someone decides we're inconvenient. The silence that followed was different now, charged with tension rather than mere attention. Marcus could feel the shift in the chamber's atmosphere as representatives realized that the human standing before them wasn't going to plead for mercy or beg for understanding, was issuing a challenge. So, if this council has decided that humanity poses a threat to galactic stability, Marcus continued, then I have one question for you. What exactly do you plan to do about it? The crystalline dome above them seemed to pulse with an inner light, and Marcus realized that his words were being broadcast beyond the chamber itself. Somewhere among the stars, other eyes were watching this confrontation unfold. The council had expected a simple judgment against a primitive species that didn't know better. Instead, they were getting their first glimpse of what humanity really was. A species that had clawed its way to the stars from a world that had tried to kill them every day of their existence, and had no intention of bowing to anyone who thought they knew better. The real confrontation was about to begin, and Marcus found himself smiling for the first time since entering the chamber. If the galaxy wanted to see what humans were capable of when their backs were against the wall, they were about to get an education. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of Ambassador Reed's defiant challenge. As Marcus was escorted through the labyrinthine corridors of Council Station toward a secure holding area, he caught glimpses of frantic activity that suggested his words had struck deeper than intended. Alien representatives clustered in animated discussions, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds, lights, and electromagnetic pulses that the station's translation system struggled to process. Marcus wasn't alone in his cell. His companion was a being he had never expected to see again. Kai, the Veltar refugee who had lived on Earth for 15 years as part of humanity's first cultural exchange program. The tall, blue-skinned humanoid had been like a brother to Marcus during their university years, sharing everything from dormitory space to heated debates about interstellar politics. When Kai had departed Earth 5 years ago to return to his homeworld, Marcus had assumed their paths would never cross again. They moved you here deliberately, Kai said without preamble, his English still carrying the slight melodic accent that Marcus remembered. The council wants us to be seen together. Marcus studied his old friend, noting the tension in Kai's normally relaxed posture. You've changed, brother. Something's wrong. Kai's large dark eyes met Marcus's gaze. Everything's wrong. The Veltar homeworld was sterilized 3 months ago. Official reports blamed a plague outbreak, but I was part of the Planetary Defense Force. I saw the real cause, or orbital bombardment using council weapons. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The Veltar had been one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy, known for their philosophical traditions and artistic achievements. The idea that the Council would destroy an entire world populated by such beings was almost incomprehensible. That's impossible, Marcus said. The Council exists to prevent exactly that kind of atrocity. The Council exists to maintain control, Kai corrected, his voice bitter. My people discovered something they weren't supposed to know. We found evidence that several recent natural disasters across the galaxy were actually targeted elimination campaigns. When our government tried to bring this information to the Council, we were silenced permanently. Marcus felt the walls of the cell seeming to close in around him. The implications of what Kai was describing went far beyond simple corruption. If the Council was actively eliminating species that posed questions about their authority, then humanity's confrontational stance had just painted a target on Earth itself. How many others know about this? Marcus asked. More than the Council realizes, Kai replied. There's been a loose network forming for years. Our representatives from species that have noticed inconsistencies in official reports. Survivors from worlds that were supposedly lost to natural causes. Even some council members who've grown suspicious of their own leadership. The cell's door slid open with a soft hiss, and a figure entered that made Marcus's blood run cold. Captain Riley Nash had been his roommate at the military academy, and his closest friend throughout their rise through Earth's diplomatic corps. They had trained together, served together, and planned humanity's first contact protocols together. Seeing her here, wearing the silver uniform of Council security rather than Earth's diplomatic blue, felt like betrayal given physical form. "Hello, Marcus," Riley said, her voice carefully neutral. "I've been assigned as your liaison during the investigation period." Investigation period? Marcus stood slowly, studying Riley's face for any sign of the warmth they had once shared. "Since when did you join Council security?" "Since I learned some uncomfortable truths about what humanity was walking into," Riley replied. She glanced at Kai, then back to Marcus. "The Council has been planning humanity's response to first contact for decades. They've studied our psychology, our military capabilities, our social structures. They know exactly how we'll react to different types of pressure." Marcus felt as though he were standing on shifting ground. "Are you saying this entire situation was orchestrated?" "Not orchestrated, anticipated." Riley moved closer, lowering her voice. "The Council has developed what they call species management protocols. They identify emerging civilizations that show certain characteristics of rapid technological advancement, independent thinking, aggressive expansion patterns, and they create scenarios designed to test those species' responses." "Tests for what purpose?" Kai asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "To determine whether a species can be integrated into the galactic order, or whether they represent a threat that needs to be eliminated," Riley said. "Humanity scored high on every indicator that suggests eventual rebellion against Council authority. This trial isn't about judging our past actions, it's about predicting our future behavior." Marcus sank back onto the cell's simple bench, his mind racing. Everything he thought he knew about first contact had been wrong. Humanity hadn't been discovered by the galaxy. They had been under observation and evaluation for far longer than anyone on Earth suspected. The Council's seemingly arbitrary charges against humanity were actually the culmination of a careful assessment designed to justify predetermined conclusions. "So they've already decided," Marcus said. "All of this, the trial, the accusations, my chance to defend humanity, it's all theater." "Not entirely," Riley said, her voice taking on an urgent tone. "The Council leadership may have made their decision, but there are factions within the Assembly that are genuinely divided. The evidence that Kai's people discovered before their world was destroyed has been circulating through underground channels. Some representatives are beginning to question whether the Council's methods are justified, which means this trial could go either way," Kai added. "If enough species vote against the leadership's recommendation, humanity might survive. But if the predetermined outcome stands, Earth will face the same fate as my homeworld." Marcus looked between his two companions, one an alien refugee whose world had been destroyed for asking the wrong questions, the other a human who had somehow gained access to the galaxy's deepest secrets. The scope of the conspiracy they were describing was staggering, but it also revealed something important. The Council wasn't as unified as they appeared. "There's something else," Riley said, producing a small device from her uniform. "During my time with Council security, I've been gathering evidence of the elimination campaigns. Names, dates, methods, authorization codes. If this information could be presented during the trial proceedings, it might force the Council to confront their own actions publicly." "And if we're caught with that evidence?" Marcus asked. "Then we die," Riley said simply. "But if we do nothing, humanity dies anyway. At least this way we have a chance to expose the truth before the end." Marcus stood and walked to the cell's small window, gazing out at the stars beyond. Somewhere among those points of light was Earth, where billions of humans lived their lives unaware that their entire species was on trial for the crime of being too independent. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but it also brought clarity. "What do you need from me?" Marcus asked. "When the trial resumes, you'll have one chance to present humanity's final defense," Riley explained. "Instead of defending our past actions, we need you to put the Council itself on trial. Force them to explain their species management protocols in front of the entire Galactic Assembly. That's assuming I survive long enough to present any defense, Marcus pointed out. Kai's expression grew grim. That's why we're here together. The Council wants to see how humanity reacts when confronted with evidence of their manipulations. They're studying your responses, looking for confirmation of their assessment, but they're also revealing their own weaknesses. Marcus turned back to his companions, feeling something shift inside him. The scared diplomat who had entered this cell was being replaced by something harder, more determined. If the Council wanted to study human psychology under pressure, they were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military capability, it was their absolute refusal to surrender when fighting for something they believed in. Then let's give them a psychology lesson they'll never forget, Marcus said. When that trial resumes, we're not just going to defend humanity. We're going to declare war on the entire system that thinks it has the right to decide which species deserve to exist. The three companions looked at each other with grim understanding. The real battle for humanity's survival was about to begin, and it would be fought not with weapons but with truth. The Galactic Council chamber had been reconfigured for the resumption of humanity's trial. Additional security barriers had been installed around the central platform, and Marcus noticed that several observation pods now contained beings he hadn't seen during the first session. The air hummed with tension as representatives from across the galaxy settled into their positions, many clearly aware that something more significant than a simple species evaluation was about to unfold. Marcus stood once again on the central platform, but this time he wasn't alone. The Council had permitted Kai to appear as a witness, a decision that Marcus suspected they would soon regret. Hidden beneath Kai's ceremonial robes was the evidence device Riley had provided, containing documentation of the Council's elimination campaigns spanning decades. The Assembly will hear the final defense of the species designation human, announced the chamber's disembodied voice. Ambassador Reed, you may present your closing arguments. Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding as he prepared to take the most dangerous gamble in human history. Everything depended on his ability to turn the trial's focus away from humanity's alleged crimes and onto the Council's hidden activities. Honored representatives, Marcus began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, I stand before you not to defend humanity against the charges brought by this Council, but to level far more serious accusations against the Council itself. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds, lights and electromagnetic pulses as hundreds of alien representatives reacted with shock, outrage, and in some cases what appeared to be satisfaction. The security barriers around the platform began to glow more brightly, and Marcus could see armed guards moving into position around the chamber's perimeter. The Council will not permit these proceedings to be disrupted by unfounded accusations, the voice announced. But Marcus pressed on before they could silence him. 3 months ago, the Veltar homeworld was destroyed, Marcus said, gesturing toward Kai. Official reports blamed a plague outbreak, but we have evidence that the planet was subjected to orbital bombardment using Council weapons. This attack was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic campaign to eliminate species that pose questions about Council authority. Kai stepped forward and activated the hidden device. Suddenly, the chamber's main display screens flickered to life, showing classified Council documents, authorization codes, and most damning of all, recorded communications between Council leadership discussing the necessary elimination of problematic species. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives throughout the chamber began demanding explanations, their various forms of communication creating a storm of noise that even the translation systems couldn't fully process. Several of the floating observation pods began moving toward the exits, while others descended toward the platform as if to get a closer look at the evidence being presented. These documents are classified, one of the Council's senior administrators protested, its mechanical voice cutting through the chaos. The security breach that allowed their acquisition invalidates any conclusions drawn from their content. The security breach was necessary, Marcus replied, his voice rising above the tumult, because the Council has been operating a secret program to monitor, evaluate, and eliminate emerging species based on their potential threat to established galactic order. Humanity isn't on trial for our actions, We're on trial for our potential to think independently. More displays activated around the chamber, showing detailed surveillance records from Earth dating back centuries. The assembled representatives watched in stunned silence as they saw footage of human historical events, technological developments, and social changes, all cataloged and analyzed by council observers who had been studying humanity since before most humans knew that aliens existed. A new voice echoed through the chamber, deeper and more resonant than any they had heard before. Enough. The word carried such authority that even the chaos in the chamber began to subside. A section of the chamber's wall slid away, revealing a hidden observation area where several figures sat in shadow. These were clearly the true power behind the council, beings so ancient or powerful that they remained concealed even during formal proceedings. The species designation, human, has revealed classified information that threatens galactic stability, the voice continued. The trial proceedings are hereby suspended pending implementation of containment protocols. Marcus felt the platform beneath his feet beginning to sink toward the chamber floor, while energy barriers activated around both him and Kai. But the hidden ruler's attempt to end the proceedings had come too late. The evidence was already spreading through the chamber's communication networks, and several of the alien representatives were broadcasting the information to their home governments. Containment protocols, Marcus shouted as the platform continued to descend. Is that what you called it when you destroyed the Veltar homeworld? When you eliminated the Zephyrians for developing psychic communication? When you sterilized 17 different worlds because their inhabitants asked too many questions? The chamber was now in complete chaos. Representatives were evacuating their observation pods in panic, while others were demanding immediate explanations from council leadership. Security forces were attempting to establish order, but they appeared to be outnumbered by representatives, who were now questioning the legitimacy of the entire governing system. Kai managed to activate another function of the evidence device before the energy barriers could fully contain them. New information flooded the chamber's displays, not just documentation of past eliminations, but current targeting lists that included dozens of species currently under evaluation for potential containment. You want to know what makes humanity dangerous? Marcus called out as armed guards surrounded their position. It's not our technology or our military capabilities. It's our absolute refusal to accept that anyone has the right to decide our fate without our consent. And now every species in this chamber knows that the council has been making those decisions for them as well. The hidden ruler's response was swift and decisive. Emergency klaxons began sounding throughout the station as blast doors sealed off sections of the chamber. The lights dimmed to an ominous red, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly as the station systems were diverted to defensive operations. All non-essential personnel will evacuate immediately, the disembodied voice announced. This facility is now under martial law until the security breach can be contained. But even as the council leadership attempted to regain control of the situation, Marcus could see that their centuries-old system of management was crumbling. Representatives who had never questioned council authority were now broadcasting calls for independence to their home governments. Species that had accepted their limited role in galactic civilization were suddenly demanding explanations for surveillance programs they had never known existed. As the energy barriers around Marcus and Kai intensified, preparing to transport them to whatever fate the council's hidden rulers had planned, Marcus felt a grim satisfaction. Humanity had been on trial for their potential to disrupt galactic order, and they had just proven that assessment absolutely correct. The revolution he and his companions had sparked wouldn't be contained to this chamber or even this station. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under council authority for millennia were about to discover that they had choices they never knew existed. The age of unquestioned rule was ending, and it was ending because humanity had done what they did best, refused to go quietly when someone tried to eliminate them. The real war for galactic freedom was about to begin, and humanity had just fired the first shot by simply telling the truth. As the transportation beams activated around them, Marcus smiled grimly. If the council wanted to see what humans were capable of when their survival was threatened, they were about to get a demonstration that would reshape the entire galaxy. The transportation beam deposited Marcus and Kai in a detention facility deep within Council Station's most secure levels. The walls here were composed of some kind of energy-absorbing material, that made the space feel dead and oppressive, while the lack of windows left them with no sense of time or location. But their isolation was broken within hours by an unexpected arrival. Riley Nash, still wearing her council security uniform but now accompanied by a group of aliens Marcus didn't recognize. "The station's in chaos," Riley said without preamble as she deactivated the cell's containment field. "Half the council representatives have barricaded themselves in their quarters, while the other half are trying to evacuate back to their home systems. The hidden rulers made a critical error when they implemented martial law. It confirmed everything you accused them of." Marcus stood slowly, his muscles stiff from the energy field's effects. "How did you get down here?" "Council security is splitting apart," Riley explained. "About 40% of the forces are following orders from the hidden leadership, but the rest are questioning whether they've been serving the right cause. When classified intelligence showed that several of our own species have been targeted for evaluation, a lot of people started reconsidering their loyalties." One of the aliens with Riley stepped forward, a reptilian being with scales that shifted color as he moved. "I am Commander Vex of the Saurian Defense Corps," he said, his translated voice carrying a military precision. "My government received intelligence from this station 3 hours ago, proving that our recent border conflicts were artificially instigated by council operatives. We are no longer aligned with the current galactic administration." Marcus began to understand the scope of what was happening. The evidence they had revealed wasn't just exposing the council's crimes, it was actively destroying the political alliances that had maintained galactic stability for centuries. Species that had trusted the council's guidance were discovering that they had been manipulated into conflicts that served the hidden ruler's agenda. "How many governments have withdrawn support?" Kai asked. 47 so far," Riley replied, "with more announcing independence every hour. But the real problem is that the hidden rulers aren't just planning to weather this crisis, they're preparing to implement something called Protocol Zero." The temperature in the detention cell seemed to drop as Riley's words sank in. Marcus had seen references to Protocol Zero in some of the classified documents, but the specifics had been beyond their security clearance. "Complete galactic reset," Commander Vex explained grimly. "Simultaneous elimination of all species currently under evaluation, followed by the installation of puppet governments on worlds that survived the initial purge. The hidden rulers would rather rule over a diminished galaxy than risk losing control entirely." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Protocol Zero wasn't just about eliminating humanity. It was about destroying dozens of civilizations that had shown any sign of independent thinking. The scale of genocide being contemplated was beyond anything in recorded galactic history. "When?" Marcus asked. "Implementation begins in 18 hours, Riley said. "Automated weapons platforms are already moving into position around targeted systems. Earth is at the top of the list. But the Veltar situation has been expanded to include every world that received the leaked intelligence." The group made their way through the station's service corridors, avoiding areas still under martial law control. Around them, Marcus could hear the sounds of a complex breaking apart, emergency announcements in dozens of languages, the hum of ships departing the station, and occasionally the distant sound of weapons fire as different factions of council security encountered each other. They reached a communication hub that had been hastily converted into a resistance command center. The room was filled with beings from across the galaxy, all working frantically at various communication and tactical displays. The diversity was staggering, but what struck Marcus most was the sense of unity among species that had probably never cooperated before. "Ambassador Reed," called a voice from across the room. Marcus turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen, Earth's senior military attaché, coordinating with what appeared to be fleet commanders from multiple species. "Earth Defense Command received your transmission. All human fleets are mobilizing, but we need coordination with allied forces if we're going to have any chance against Protocol Zero." Marcus moved to the central tactical display, which showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with red indicators marking targeted systems and blue indicators showing the positions of allied fleets. The scope of the emerging conflict was overwhelming, but so was the speed with which independent species were organizing resistance. "The hidden rulers made a strategic error," Commander Vex observed, pointing to the display. "By targeting so many species simultaneously, they've created the largest military alliance in galactic history. Species that have been enemies for centuries are now coordinating their fleets against a common threat. Kai was working at one of the communication stations, his forearms moving across multiple interfaces simultaneously. "I'm receiving reports from across the galaxy," he said. "The Crystalline Collective has completely withdrawn from Council authority. The hegemony of worlds is mobilizing their reserve fleets. Even some of the mechanical intelligence networks are declaring independence." "What about the Council loyalists?" Marcus asked. "About 30% of the galaxy's military forces are still following Council orders," Admiral Chen replied, "but they're scattered and confused. The hidden rulers kept their plans so secret that even their own supporters don't understand what they're supposed to be defending." Marcus studied the tactical display, his mind racing as he tried to process the implications of what he was seeing. Humanity's defiant stand during the trial had triggered something far larger than a simple rebellion. It had sparked a galactic civil war that would determine whether free will or authoritarian control would shape the future of civilization. "We need to coordinate our response," Marcus said, addressing the room. "Protocol Zero depends on simultaneous strikes against isolated systems. If we can establish communication networks between targeted worlds and coordinate defensive strategies, we can turn their strength against them." "Agreed," Commander Vex said, "but we also need to strike at the source. The hidden rulers are operating from facilities that most of the galaxy doesn't even know exist. If we can identify and neutralize their command structure, we can stop Protocol Zero before it fully activates." Riley moved to another console and activated a display showing classified Council facility locations. "I've been gathering intelligence on the hidden infrastructure for months," she said. "There are 17 primary command nodes scattered across the galaxy, each one capable of coordinating elimination protocols for entire sectors." The room fell silent as the full scope of the challenge became clear. They weren't just fighting a war. They were fighting against an enemy that had been planning for this contingency for longer than most species had existed. The hidden rulers had backup systems, alternative command structures, and weapons technology that far exceeded anything the Allied forces possessed. But Marcus looked around the room at the beings who had chosen to stand against impossible odds, and he felt something that surprised him. Hope. The galaxy's greatest strength wasn't its technology or its military might. It was the same thing that had carried humanity from a single world to the stars. When faced with extinction, thinking beings would fight for their right to exist, and they would find ways to win that their enemies couldn't imagine. "Then we'd better get started," Marcus said, moving toward the communication array. "Earth to all Allied forces. This is Ambassador Marcus Reed speaking for the Free Species Alliance. As of this moment, humanity formally declares war on the hidden rulers of the Galactic Council and any forces that support Protocol Zero. We're not just fighting for our own survival, we're fighting for the future of free will in this galaxy." The responses came immediately from across the star. Mappa, dozens of species confirming their commitment to the Alliance, military commanders coordinating strike plans, and most importantly, the sound of hope returning to voices that had moments before been facing extinction. The revolution that had begun with humanity's refusal to submit was about to become something larger than anyone had imagined. The hidden rulers wanted a resetter. They were about to get one, but not the kind they had planned. The final battle for galactic freedom began not with massive fleet engagements, but with something far more dangerous to the hidden rulers: the complete breakdown of information control. Across 17 sectors, the classified networks that had maintained the Council's authority for millennia were being systematically infiltrated by an alliance that had learned to think like humans, creatively, unpredictably, and with an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Marcus stood in the command center aboard the hastily renamed Freedom Station, watching tactical displays that showed the most complex military operation in galactic history. The station had been Council headquarters just days ago. Now it served as coordination hub for over 300 species that had declared independence from the hidden ruler's authority. Protocol Zero activation in 6 hours. Admiral Chen reported from her position at the central tactical display, but we're seeing encouraging developments across the board. The Crystalline Collective has successfully disabled 2 of the primary command nodes, and the Saurian Defense Corps managed to capture intact intelligence from a 3rd facility. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on a smaller display showing Earth's position. Humanity's homeworld was surrounded by the largest concentration of automated weapons platforms that the hidden rulers had deployed, making it both the most heavily defended target and the most symbolic. If Earth fell, the psychological impact on the Alliance would be devastating. Status on the Earth defense grid? Marcus asked. Something unprecedented, Commander Vex replied, his color-shifting scales showing patterns that Marcus had learned indicated excitement. Human engineers have been sharing their defensive innovations with allied species in real time. The Veltar survivors provided their expertise in energy manipulation, while the mechanical intelligences contributed advanced computational strategies. The result is a defensive network unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. Kai looked up from his communication station, his forearms still moving across multiple interfaces. I'm receiving reports from the other targeted worlds, he said. The same pattern is emerging everywhere. Species that have never worked together are combining their knowledge and capabilities. The hidden rulers designed Protocol Zero to eliminate independent thinking, but it's actually accelerating cooperation between independent thinkers. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The hidden rulers had spent millions of years preventing exactly this kind of collaboration, understanding that their control depended on keeping species isolated and competitive. By forcing those species to work together for survival, Protocol Zero had created the very alliance that could challenge their supremacy. Incoming transmission from the hidden rulers, Riley announced from her position at the intelligence station. They're requesting direct communication with human leadership. Marcus felt the command center's attention focus on him. As humanity's representative, he had become the de facto spokesman for the Alliance a responsibility that still felt surreal. 3 days ago, he had been a junior diplomat preparing for routine first contact procedures. Now he was about to negotiate with beings who had controlled galactic civilization since before Earth's sun had formed. Put them through, Marcus said. The main display shifted to show a figure that seemed to exist partly in normal space and partly in dimensions that human eyes couldn't properly process. When it spoke, the voice carried harmonics that suggested ages beyond comprehension. Species designation, human, it said. You have initiated changes that threaten the stability of galactic civilization. We offer terms for cessation of hostilities. Earth will be spared if humanity accepts permanent restriction to your home system, and all other species return to their designated roles within established order. Marcus looked around the command center, at the beings who had risked everything to stand against authoritarian control. Species that had evolved under different stars, with different biologies and different ways of thinking, all united by the simple principle that free will was worth fighting for. Counteroffer, Marcus replied. You discontinue Protocol Zero, dissolve the hidden control networks, and allow every species in the galaxy to choose their own path forward. In return, we don't broadcast the complete archive of your crimes to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The hidden ruler's form flickered with what might have been amusement or rage. You misunderstand the nature of this conflict. We have guided galactic evolution for millions of years. Without our oversight, chaos will consume everything. Species will develop weapons that could destroy reality itself. Maybe, Marcus acknowledged, but that's their choice to make. You've been preventing galactic civilization from growing up by making all the hard decisions for them. Today we're giving them back the right to make their own mistakes. The display shifted to show tactical information that made Marcus's heart race. The automated weapons platforms around Earth were powering up for activation, while similar preparations were visible around dozens of other targeted worlds. Protocol Zero was entering its final phase. Implementation proceeds, the hidden ruler announced. Your alliance lacks the coordination necessary to prevent simultaneous elimination across multiple sectors. This communication is concluded. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Around the tactical displays, Marcus could see the scope of what they were facing. One, weapons technology that could sterilize entire worlds, deployed with precision that spoke of millions of years of preparation. But he could also see something the hidden rulers had missed. The alliance networks that Kai was monitoring showed real-time communication between hundreds of worlds, with tactical information, defensive strategies, and technological innovations being shared faster than any centralized command structure could process. The hidden rulers were fighting a war using the same authoritarian methods they had always employed, while their enemies were fighting like humans here with creativity, adaptability, and absolute determination. All stations, this is Freedom Command, Marcus announced on the Alliance-wide channel. Protocol Zero activation is beginning. Every species, every world, every individual who believes in the right to choose their own future. This is your moment. Show the galaxy what free beings can accomplish when they work together. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across 17 sectors, defensive networks activated that combined the best innovations of hundreds of different species. Weapons platforms that had been designed to overwhelm isolated worlds found themselves facing coordinated resistance that adapted faster than their programming could compensate for. On Earth, humanity's defensive grid performed exactly as Marcus had hoped, not just protecting the planet, but serving as a coordination hub for defensive operations across the galaxy. The same independence and creativity that had made humans seem dangerous to the Council was now being shared with every species willing to embrace it. Enemy weapons platforms are being neutralized across multiple sectors, Admiral Chen reported, her voice tight with excitement. The Crystalline Collective has turned 3 automated fleets against their original programming. The mechanical intelligences have established quantum communication networks that are outpacing Council response times. As the hours passed, the impossible began to seem inevitable. Protocol Zero, designed to eliminate independent thinking, was being defeated by the largest display of independent thinking in galactic history. Species that had never imagined working together were discovering that their different approaches to problem-solving made them stronger as a whole. When the final hidden ruler command node fell to a joint assault by 12 different species, Marcus felt something shift in the galaxy itself. The artificial constraints that had limited technological and social development for millions of years were finally breaking down, replaced by the chaotic but vital energy of beings choosing their own paths forward. Freedom Command to all Allied forces, Marcus announced. Protocol Zero has been neutralized. The hidden ruler networks have been dismantled. For the first time in galactic history, every species is free to determine their own future without interference from those who claim to know better. The celebrations that erupted across the command center were matched by similar responses from worlds throughout the galaxy. But Marcus knew this victory was just the beginning. The real challenge would be what came next, helping hundreds of species learn to cooperate without the authoritarian structure they had grown accustomed to. As he looked out at the stars beyond Freedom Station, Marcus reflected on what humanity had brought to the galaxy. Not advanced technology or superior military strategy, but something far more valuable, the unshakable belief that every thinking being deserved the right to choose their own destiny. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when that belief spread from a single world to encompass every star. It would be messy, unpredictable, sometimes dangerous, but it would be real growth, chosen freely by beings who had finally learned they had choices. The age of hidden rulers was over. The age of galactic freedom had begun, and it had started with humanity's simple refusal to accept that anyone else had the right to decide their fate. The Foster brothers,